Jordan Peterson is very critical about conventional universities. He's developed the Peterson Academy, and his quote was, "This program is to satisfy the mass hunger for education not found in demented education."
Demented education.
The universities must recognize today that ChatGPT, Copilot, and other robotics, they're really
Welcome to the Game of Impossible podcast. My name is Leon. This is my dad, Idris Jala. We are a father and son podcast where we discuss all things transformation through the lens of business, leadership, sport, and faith. Dad, you gave a talk about 2 weeks ago now at Sunway.
at Sunway.
So in that talk, it was quite interesting because you talked about employment trends and the implications to universities.
Right.
We have had a previous episode where we talked a little bit about the university model and whether or not a degree is still relevant. But I thought today it would be good to deep dive a little bit more and to look at current models of universities, but also explore some disruptive models as well, like the Peterson Academy, and how these relate to existing or current employment trends that we see in the world. You know, according to the World Economic Forum in a 2021 report, it says that 50% of all employees will need to be reskilling by 2025 due to automation. That's a big whopping 50%.
Yeah.
You know, maybe before we go into some of these trends, just looking at that one alone, do you think that our universities are offering us that a sufficient baseline to be able to prep for automation, for AI and things like that?
Yeah, if the universities want to be up there among the Ivy League universities, they really have to up their game on the advent of AI, automation, etc., without doubt. But if you don't catch up, you don't improve, you don't integrate that in the program, your universities will go down the ranking without doubt in no time. So I do agree with the World Economic Forum in that said 50% of universities must embrace this big time.
What are some things that you currently, under the Sunway Group, you have Sunway University. What are some things that the university is currently doing already to better prepare its students?
We are in Sunway, we're trying very hard to integrate AI into our programs, but there are bureaucracies associated in government that prevents us from moving. We'll go a little bit more detail later, how difficult that is still.
In your view, though, what are some of the emerging trends that you have seen in the market?
I see in the marketplace. I've been, Leon, I've worked now for 42 years altogether since I graduated and started working in 1982. In that time, as I've started to work, I started to look over the last few years, the changes in employment trends is so rapid, and I find 5 very big trends. The first trend is the pervasive use of artificial intelligence and automation in businesses. And the second one is the advent and the rise of the gig economy. So it's a lot of young people don't want a full-time job. They really want to find work that is part-time, the gig economy. The third one is the increasing importance of lifelong learning. People want flexibility. They don't really want to sit down and spend 4 years or 3 years doing a degree course, but they want courses that are specific to the needs of the workplace that they want. So that lifelong learning is a key. That's the third one. The fourth one, it's been there before, but even more important now, the fourth one, the winning collaboration between the academia and the private sector. Because increasingly now, there is a lot more funding that universities are prepared to put to the universities, provided the universities do research for applied work that they need in their company. So applied research is key, but they're going to put money in this. So I think that's the fourth one. The fifth and most important one, I'm of the view that employers today demand, and the word is demand. The reason why they demand is because the world is so globalized. The world is so globalized and it's highly competitive. And so they demand graduates to be equipped with the competencies to be able to deliver big, fast results. Employees want results. They don't want graduates to say, well, I know how to do it, but they say, well, I want results. And the employees want big results. They don't want small incremental results. Not only do they want the results to be big, but they want it fast. So this idea of universities needing to equip the graduates, whether you're doing engineering or you're doing medicine, whether you're doing pharmacy, you want people to be equipped with the capability to achieve big, fast results in whatever discipline that you are interested in. That's what they demand. So those are the 5 trends.
Yeah. Let's go into the first one.
Yeah.
So, adapting and upskilling for automation and even for AI.
Yeah.
What do you think that universities can do in their existing structures? And maybe what are some things that we are observing outside, maybe other models outside of the traditional model that are helping to equip people for this?
The universities must recognize today that ChatGPT, Copilot, and other robotics, they really have improved. I mean, I have been using ChatGPT a few years ago, and I look at the current version today, it is really, really clever now and does so many things that I marvel at how good it is today. And so that is one. And the other thing is that a lot of generative AI is going to displace many traditional jobs. So I believe the thing that the universities must do is to integrate AI and automation skills in practically all the programs that they run, whether it's to do with engineering, whether it's to do with medicine or biosciences, it doesn't matter.
You were describing it from the standpoint of universities using AI to enhance or to optimize their offering. Or are you saying that universities should find a way to embed learning through AI for the students
Correct.
as well?
Embed it for the students in the program, so that the students completely aware about AI. So of course, there's always a program on AI by itself. You could get a diploma or degree, but I really believe that AI must be integrated in every program.
Why do you feel that it should be integrated in the university syllabus versus going to a dedicated course for it? Which arguably, just based on my observations, I would personally probably lean more towards a dedicated AI course led by a true practitioner of AI.
I'm glad you raised it. The reason is this. You've seen the recent scores lately that the AI, ChatGPT, is now beginning to pass the engineering degrees and the law degrees. Because you know that if you integrate it inside there, you have to teach the student to say that actually the material is already there. So you have to really challenge yourself that you must now begin to look at the generative AI to give you the basic answers, that at least 80% of the outcome is already there. You now have to build your answers so that your answers is going to be far better than what is put out there. I think this is the key. So I think there's a lot of unexplored terrain in this area, because I think it's already passed exams in medicine, it's passed exams in engineering, and I think in law as well. So really, I think fundamentally there's tremendous change that has to be made in the module itself. Because once you teach the students, they can get the answers through ChatGPT. So I think the key for us to then say is we should require the students to use ChatGPT at the universities and build the argument so that it becomes richer. Because you know what? ChatGPT cannot do critical thinking in the way we really critically do it. And ChatGPT and even Copilot does not do creativity as much as we do today.
Well, not yet.
Not yet.
And I mean, to be honest, it sort of can.
It can, but
provided you know how to write the correct prompt. But like you say, perhaps a bit robotic. I mean, personally, I sometimes have tried it to do more creative writing.
And I give you an example
today. It doesn't turn out that well.
I give you an example today, Leon. If you watch any Netflix movie, a foreign movie, and you want to see one in Thai or in Spanish, if you want to listen to it in English, you know it's bad acting, very bad, because they're using, artificial intelligence to do it. So it does not provide the artistic talent of of an actor that does that. It's monotonous in voice. It's like someone reading a script. So I've actually stopped watching it in English because it's so bad. The acting is so poor. And the other thing it doesn't do is Chat GPT and all that doesn't help you with emotional intelligence. That's a very important part of work environment. I always think that the best employees are people who are really good in IQ, but the EQ component of it. So I think the basic rubric of the answers for any questions at universities, you should use generative AI. You should not say that's plagiarism. You should really now embrace it. And you should tell the student, if you don't use it, you're daft. You should use it.
Well, in any case, I don't think that. Personally, I think it's a lot easier now to accept Gen AI tools as part of the practice of doing your university assignments, because there are signatures within, let's say, something that's generated by AI, which will tell you that it was done by AI. So in the same way that we have existing tools right now to curb plagiarism, obviously this is not factoring AI, but in my time, there were existing tools anyway to be able to do this. So I would imagine all you would need to do is embed that within your existing sort of plagiarism check software to have, first of all, just generally scanning what have you borrowed from other sources and not properly credited or cited, plus what has been borrowed or what has been inspired by AI, but also not cited. Just in the same way that we would do a bibliography, there should be some sort of practice for if AI has been used for a certain tool, use it, but then cite it as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think that is the first trend, and that's very important. So the pervasive use of AI and automation, and in particular robotics as well, in the work environment, and that universities must equip the student with that. And I said we won't just do it for a diploma or a degree in AI, but really to integrate AI into every subject that you teach so that people really know how to use it. Because AI is going to be pervasive in your work environment. You really need to embrace it rather than reject it. Yeah.
And what was the second trend?
The second was a rise and advent of gig economy. Your brother, Max, he's 100% gig economy. And the guy works in London. He does that, and all he does is, there are so many people like Max that are not interested in a normal 9 or 8 to 5 kind of a job. They want to work part-time. They want freedom to run their businesses. They want to do contractual work, and they want to decide when to work and not to work. So the gig economy is a very big thing. And I would say today, businesses now also beginning to embrace it. You know why they like it? Many companies now like people like that because they hire on demand. They don't have to keep a huge payroll of employees. They hire people on demand as and when they require them. And so cost reduction is very efficient. And the other one is the vast pool of talent that's available. You're not restricted by your existing employees.
Just to backtrack, it's not just cost savings, but it's also a little easier administratively as well to hire someone on a contract basis.
Very easy.
Rather than bringing someone in as full-time staff.
Absolutely. And you have a vast pool of talent available today. And particularly in the world that is, you can do virtual working, and there's a lot more things that's available today. Huge pool of talent that you can tap on. So employers do really want that. So the rise and advent of gig economy is going to stay, and it's going to be even more. So it's imperative, in my view, for universities to embrace this and really make changes in their university, their curriculum, and the things that they're doing to deal with this.
Do you think then that the implication here is for universities to do more skills-based training as opposed to academic training? I personally, I think there's room for both. But I think my personal contention is still whether or not universities should focus on being a place for academic learning and getting your kind of vocational training or skills-based training done outside by a true practitioner in that field. So if I were to, for example, just going back to AI. If I were to want to learn how to do AI,
Sure.
personally, I would rather not go to. I know that I think it was University of Oxford
Yeah.
that has some sort of AI training or some sort of AI course. But personally, I feel like I would gravitate more towards maybe an AI course, or developed by a company that truly practices and truly uses it, because then I know that whatever they are teaching is stuff that is actually being applied in that context, and there's a reason to believe, because this organization or this individual
Absolutely.
has been able to use it, and there's been proof of success through using these tools in that particular way. So what do you think is the kind of balance to be drawn between the academic study but also the skills-based
So again,
learning?
I would say that universities should integrate the gig economy as a subject within all of the programs. Let's suppose
see. You
let's
mean-
just
okay.
let's suppose that you're doing a degree in engineering. You do your traditional stuff in engineering, but currently you now realize that maybe half of the students, they're not going to graduate and become engineers in a big company.
Yeah.
They're going
Okay.
to start their own business. So you do, as you rightly pointed out, the universities must have a subject called entrepreneurship program.
Okay, that makes sense,
then
and I agree.
if you want to be a lawyer, and then you're not going to be a lawyer for a big company, you're going to start your own legal
Yeah.
firm. So
So if let's say if you take
Correct.
what is something that, okay, maybe if we were to take, let's say Max,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
went back. He decided to go and pursue a master's.
Yeah.
So he had graduated years ago. He worked, and then he decided he was going to go and do his master's, a master's in fine arts.
Yeah.
From doing business management, that was his first degree. He then went on to do a master's in fine arts. In fine arts, I presume that would look something like having a module
Yeah.
on how to develop then a contract, for
Yeah.
example, how to develop, how to do
Correct.
your how to
pitch.
sell, how to pitch,
all
of that stuff.
and also how to put a value to the work, because you have to then do all the costing that's required for doing this. At the same time, if you start to do that, you have to teach them on digital marketing and sales. You have to now teach people, if they're doing gig economy, and because a lot of the venture institutions, they are prepared to put seed funding for a lot of work that's needed. So what can you do with approaching the venture institutions to get all this capital, to get that seed funding for this work? So, and most importantly, in my view, people who lecture on this subject must be gig people themselves,
Yes.
gig lecturers, because they are really practitioners in the
Correct.
field. They don't talk about it academically, they can relate about it in real experience. So I think you get real practitioners to provide the lectures on the gig economy as it is infused in the degree or diploma program. So I think if you do that, it become very, very rich. The third one is about lifelong learning. This is a very, very important thing. Lately, I've been really watching the podcast by Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson said he's very critical about conventional universities. He's developed the Peterson Academy, and his quote was, "This program that he's creating there is to satisfy the mass hunger for education not found in demented education."
Demented education.
He's so critical about the rules
Yeah.
that are out there that become barrier to learning. There's
Such
so
as?
many, so many things, like you must be there for 3 years to graduate. You must
Yeah.
produce all sorts of things that the rules are associated. If a guy can finish the degree in 1 or 2 years and fulfill the requirement, why can't you give him the full degree?
Right.
When he's totally competent, why must you finish the 3 years or mandatory 4 years to go and do it? So these are rules that people put.
We've had this discussion before,
Yeah.
in an earlier podcast, and then I think on the topic of the duration of your degree, obviously I also personally agree that you don't really need, let's say in my case, just take a normal degree. Obviously this doesn't count, this doesn't factor things like medicine, but just a regular degree, generally 3 years. you obviously don't need a full 3 years to actually get up
Yeah.
to speed, to
Yeah.
get the knowledge required to get your degree. If I think back to my time in uni, I would consider the first year a bit of a write-off. The first year was really just a year to to make friends, to socialize, to party. The real work was really only in years 2 and 3. And quite honestly, I could have done without the first year.
Sure.
And we could have just said, you know what, we're going to go straight into the same content, the same stuff we were reading and learning in years 2 and 3. So by that token, I agree.
Yeah.
But then we were also discussing on the flip side, maybe part of the argument for that is because the university experience is more than just the degree, it's more than just the kind of classroom learning that you get, but also some of the other life experiences that you build, living with other people, having to cook for yourself. So arguably a longer period of having to do that kind of independent learning is also more years to be able to build a bit of a network with people. So I get that side of the argument as well. But I agree with you. If you were to just look at what would be the most efficient way to do things, I also partly think it's a little silly. Maybe people can have an option of whether they want to do
flexibility
3 years or do an express.
John Peterson is of the view that lifelong learning comes so important that people, let's say people who've already had a degree, they want to continue to learn, but they don't want to spend another 3 years to go and get another degree. So what they need to do now is enroll on his academy, and they provide 3 courses per month that's available for people to choose, take their own flexibility to do it. And it's almost rock bottom prices. He's charging only
400 or something
$499 and 99 cents US, 499 and 99 cents per year. And this is what he does. And it's taught by top-notch professors from Ivy League universities, Harvard, Cambridge, or Stanford. And these are optional for them to take certification and testing. And there is a social community of people that comes together with the learning through a platform to engage in intellectual discourse. Highly affordable. So this is a highly disruptive academy that Jordan Peterson has put forward at rock bottom prices, and at full flexibility for people to do it and not be bound by rules that are so rigid. And so they provide flexibility. People can pick up and they want to learn for 3 months this year, maybe next month, next year take another 3, etc. So full flexibility that they're trying to do all this. So I think that's what people want. Lifelong learning is a very important component.
I think that's that is the right frame to have when it comes to learning. Lifelong. I think in the current model, you will sort of feel like you need to be sure on what you want to learn because you've got to commit 3 years or 4 years of your life to getting that degree. But if you see life or if you see the learning journey as a lifelong journey, then you'll be more willing to take up a 3-month course on this thing or a 1-year sort of Peterson Academy type course in another discipline. And then in the following year, you learn another one.
You yourself mentioned that you have been learning a lot from certain podcasts that you listen. I mean, tell me more about your experiences. What is your favorite podcast? Where you're learning as much, Leon?
To be honest, one of them is, and people might find this surprising because it's very different to this podcast. It's a podcast called Parenting Hell. Parenting Hell is it's hosted by 2 British comedians. And it's about parenting, but because they're comedians, it's just done through conversation and very funny conversation about 2 guys who share their experiences and challenges. In the introduction, they describe it as where we talk about our parenting woes, the woes of parenting. But the odd thing is, ironically, even though it's a funny podcast, it's mainly it's a lot of satire. I actually learn a lot from it because as they share their experiences through story, not through teaching, there's indirectly a learning component to it because by doing that, they are essentially reflecting on their experiences. And out of that, there are actually learnings as well that they articulate, but they do it they package it in humor. But what's really interesting is that this podcast, it's very much like this. It started as two guys.
Yeah.
At that time, it was during the lockdown, and they had just become parents. Similar to me, very similar timelines. I also just became a dad in that time. And so they started to do this podcast, just the two of them. And because they were in lockdown, they would just meet over Zoom and they would just decide to record it. But now what they've done is that they have a 2 times per week posting cadence. So they have one episode which will be like this, just still a dialogue between the two of them and a lot of banter and very funny. And then the other episode in the week is with a guest.
Right.
So usually a celebrity guest who is either a parent already or a parent to be. And then they exchange stories, but there's a lot of learning through that. And it made me think, some people don't necessarily learn through the traditional mode of teaching, even in the form of a podcast. Some people respond to this type of, this type of content, which is, I think we are somewhat of a hybrid of conversation, some anecdotes, but it's still a little bit more explicitly, I guess, teaching and knowledge-based versus a podcast like that, which is very story-based, but then there's learning there as well. So I found that an interesting case study for different modes of learning. Some people learn differently. I personally like to have different sources. So I personally I enjoy academia, so I also enjoy that form of studying, which is why I've done 2 degrees. But there's also a lot of space for this type of learning. And even beyond that, there's many other forms of learning as well.
I think learning today is explosive, Leon, because of the media that we have. YouTube is an incredible platform for people to learn so much. I mean, the sky's the limit for learning. And I learn so much every single day. I learn about many things that I really want to learn. It's if you are curious and you really want to learn, the sky is the limit. Lifelong learning is such an important thing.
And just to add to that, I think this podcast has also been a good example. A good example of taking a bit of that lifelong learning approach, but marrying that with also experiential learning. So I think me and us learning how to do this podcast, obviously a lot of it has come through just doing it. A lot of trial and error, and we learn by doing. But I think we are afforded that ability to quickly do and quickly learn because of the fact that the information is available to us quickly. We can watch YouTube videos on how to do certain things, see examples of how a good podcast setup is done, not just through theory, but by seeing it actually done by a podcaster, by a real practitioner in the field. And when you get that quick feedback of, taking in or gathering insight and information, the quicker you are to then implement it. And the quicker you implement it, the quicker you can assess and see what maybe needs to be refined. And I think the fact that we do a weekly posting cadence has also then helped with that, because every week we put up an episode, every week we have something to look at and think, maybe I don't sound so good, or maybe the camera angle needs to be changed, or maybe we should change the way that we intro, change the way that we create hooks around each episode. So lifelong learning also means, committing to, a lifetime of just also making mistakes. But we make mistakes quicker, when we're able to get the information that we need quicker as well.
If I'm a lecturer at university today, Leon, I will do a podcast every week, because that's when you get the students to really get to follow your program, because if they don't come to your classes, they can watch the podcast and your students will be able to follow your program throughout. I mean, there are this guy called Professor Muhammad Tajuddin. He has a podcast.
Yes,
of course, he talks about.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, he talks about world affairs, current affairs. He talks about it, but he's also an architect.
Yes.
If I was a lecturer like him, I would do a podcast on architecture. I will then be able to then continue, so that a lot of people can learn whether they're picking a course, and it will create a lot more buzz around it as well. So I think my point is that lecturers should think about just outside the classroom, must think beyond the classroom for people who are really interested in lifelong learning.
Yeah. since you're mentioning that, I actually didn't share this with you, but I'm trying to find it now. Someone actually commented on one of our episodes recently on YouTube.
Yeah.
I want to do the message justice. I want to actually find the message and then read it verbatim. Okay, so the comment says, this is by someone called Rafiq. Rafiq7960. So if you're listening to this, shout out to you. But so this person said, just started to binge on the videos last month. Proud to say I've gained a lot more here as compared to my MBA studies.
Wow, that's good.
So I
Thank
think
you,
that,
Rafiq.
Yeah, that's really, really high praise. But that just testifies to what you were saying earlier about the real value of including platforms like this or modes of teaching like this as well. And even, the Diary of a CEO.
Oh, yeah, that's really, really good.
That is an amazing podcast. But even his podcast has now, I think if I'm not mistaken, it's either the Navy or some other institution has officially used his podcast content as official resource for training their students, training their people in their academy.
Yeah.
So I mean that just tells you I think where the world is going in terms of knowledge and just the sheer abundance of not just availability of knowledge and information, but just growing mediums as well for knowledge sharing. So it's interesting times.
For sure. Yeah. So the fourth trend, global trend, is that universities must embrace winning collaboration with the private sector.
What does that look like?
And you think about it as triangle, Leon. In this triangle, you want to make sure the education is really top-notch, Ivy League quality education, but at the same time, you need cutting-edge applied R&D research. And finally, the other side is funding required. So to do the applied research, you need private sector to come in, to put the money inside. They wouldn't do it if you're not going to put up applied research that is related to the kind of things that they do. And if you can get the funding, the right level of funding, and you get the quality students, researchers that are involved, I think that you get the best quality.
So what do you think are the gaps right now? What are universities not doing to secure more
funding?
The
other way I'll put it is, let me talk about the ones who are really doing it today. Stanford, they do this Stanford is the hub for Silicon Valley, for Google, Apple, HP, and Viada. And also MIT, they have an MIT Industrial Liaison Program with Boeing, with IBM and Google. Cambridge, they have a collaboration with AstraZeneca and under what they call the Cambridge Enterprise Program. And then the University of Tokyo does it with Toyota, Hitachi, and Sony. Very specific. And Harvard University is where I lecture twice a year since 2012. We have the Harvard Ministerial Leadership Program. This is sponsored by Big Win Philanthropy, Gates Foundation, and Warren Buffett, Susan Park Foundation. So they put the money there. Then we bring ministers of public health, ministers of education from all around the world, and ministers of finance. They come to Boston. Half of the lecturers are Harvard professors. The other half are practitioners like me. So the students are the ministers that come to Boston, and they're there for a week. And they go through a very intensive learning. And I do believe that collaboration is absolutely key. So if you are a vice chancellor of university, and if you're not looking for the best collaboration with the universities, you're going to be left in the lurch compared to competition. So this is the way to go. The top universities do this today. And so all the other universities who are not doing it, that's why they're not going up in the ranking, because they don't have the funding required to do the research, the quality research, and therefore the citations are not there. If the citations are not there for the research papers that are written, then you don't have an increase in the ranking. So I really believe that universities must take a leaf from the Ivy League universities where they really embrace this. And I happened to have visited MIT not too long ago, and I visited the place they were doing there. One of the things that surprised me most was as we walking through the university campus, we went through a big room, and I was so shocked. You know what did we find there? They give free bananas. Loads of bananas.
Why bananas?
So I asked them, what's happening here? Why was free bananas available every day? 24 hours the bananas are available for any student there. So as it turned out, a very big philanthropist who gave a lot of money to MIT for research and work there, he found out there were a lot of students who didn't have much to eat. And while they were doing the work.
I see.
And they were discussing it, somebody told him, wouldn't have a great idea if you just make bananas for free. And that's why they have that room available for free bananas for anybody who's going out there. So, I mean, the point was they're focusing on everything that is needed to get the students to get the best out from them. And they put the funding required. So that guy put the funding not only for the research work, but he also gave it beyond that to put bananas for the students there.
I think funding is also important because I would imagine that, as things progress, as information continues to become more and more accessible, with people like the Peterson Academy offering this whole new, this disruptive model of disruptive university model at 400 or 500 USD annually. I think if universities are better able to secure more funding, I think there's a need for unis to maybe reconsider their pricing.
Absolutely.
And if you have more funding, then you would be in a better position to be able to do that.
To make it a lot more affordable.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that it is still worth the sort of the current fees that we are paying currently?
Absolutely, it is possible to do that. Sunway University, as you know, is a non-profit university, so we don't get a single cent of the profit that's made from the university to the founder, to Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia and his family. They don't take a single cent. They've signed off the entire university in perpetuity. So all the surpluses that are made is plowed back into scholarships. So when we grant the scholarship to the students, they practically have free education. And the other thing that we do is we then put the money for R&D, for research papers. The researchers are involved in doing academic work, that applied research that is being done there. So I think it is really possible to do that. And obviously, if you can make a lot of surplus from endowment, and we're trying to increase our endowment fund, and if you, like Harvard, for example, if I'm not mistaken, Harvard University has, correct me if I'm wrong, I think $45 billion of money in their endowment fund. It has a huge amount of money that sits there in the endowment fund. With that kind of money, it is possible for them to discount and put affordable education to a lot of needy students around the world.
On your the last trend, the increasingly hyper-competitive world that you talk about, and you align this to our motto at PEMANDU Associates of big, fast results. How can universities encourage this kind of culture, or this bias towards big, fast results in the real world?
Yeah, as you say, in the real world, increasingly hyper-competitive world, that's the world we're living in today. Employers demand, the word is demand. They demand graduates who are equipped with the competencies to deliver results. They don't want excuses. They want graduates to be able to deliver results. Not just any results, but they want it to be big, not small incremental results. And not just any big result, but they want it fast. So that demand is big, fast results. I've worked now, as I said, for 42 years. And if I look back over my life, in the last 10 years, I see this trend, particularly the last 5 years, so intense that people really struggle to even stick into a job. I had a look the other day, Leon, the median tenure that people have in an organization. Amazon, the average tenure that people stay in Amazon is only 1 year. 1 year.
Really, 1 year?
Because kiasu, tough. the demand. And Google is 1 year and 1 month. That's the average. And then Apple is 2 years. Walmart is three years and 3 months. And the reason why the average tenures are short is because there's such a demand for big, fast results. So I do believe that any universities that provide all sorts of programs available, they should equip the students to have the capacity to be able to achieve big, fast results. In our organization, we teach our client how to do it. That's why we call it the 6 secrets of transformational leadership. We do it in the 8-step big, fast result methodology. It's a real program. You and I have covered it in altogether now 30 episodes. In fact, this in itself, I could even call it the Jala Academy. If you follow the 30 episodes, you will be equipped with the tools that's available to be able to apply this. Just like the Peterson thing, except we don't charge $499. It's for free.
Yeah.
Because we really believe in lifelong learning. That means it's our opportunity to give as much insights and knowledge to people who really are interested in doing it. Because I'm very passionate about big, fast results. And I do believe that universities must think really hard what they need to do to equip graduates. So that when they graduate with a scroll, with a degree, they're equipped with the tools to be able to do big, fast results.
Currently, when you look at CVs that are sent to you, how much time do you spend looking at their degree, and how much does that influence whether or not you decide to take a chance on this candidate or not?
I only look at 3 things when I want to see whether the students I want to recruit. I call it capacity, the ability to think. And so I almost do not even I don't look at the degree because we have a case study.
Yeah.
We give them a case study and I want that person to read it for 40 minutes, read the case study. It's deliberately made so thick that you won't be able to finish it in 40 minutes. So I want that person to be able to have the capacity to say what is substance and what is noise. And we'd be able to do that. And at the same time, they're given 1 hour to prepare a presentation deck with all the pivot tables, all the sheets that are required to provide the answers to calculate it. And then they present it. And then we will grill them. So basically, I'm assessing through the case study the capacity of the person to think, to analyze, and to think laterally about a subject matter and to problem solve it. So
Which
that's
are skills that you can learn through skills-based courses.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily through a university.
No. And the second one is, I call it achievement motivation. That's when I look at the grades. I look at the student and said, when this person was doing his O-levels, let me look at the grades.
Yeah.
I look at A-levels. And I want to look at the whole thing. And I want to ask that question, is this person doing well in sports? Is he getting any medal in sports? Because I want to see the drive, the achievement motivation of that person. If someone has worked before, I don't even look at the testimonial written by the employer. I'm not interested because they're all written with superlative words.
Yeah.
All I want to know is I want to contact the HR person where that person is there. I want to know what's the merit increment for that person for the last 4 years that person worked in that company. Is it among the top 5%?
Yep.
Is it in the next 30%? Is that the remaining 50 or 70%? That's all I want. I don't care about reading
This
that.
is my first time hearing that.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that because at all the superlative, I'm not interested. I only want to know. So that's key for me.
That's a good route to take. But however, I've seen a lot of people who are very good at what they do.
Yeah.
But maybe because they are slightly more under the radar, maybe you could argue have been taken for granted in their previous workplace. So, I mean, I quite like that, but sometimes that approach also maybe doesn't take into account those sorts of nuances in a person's development.
That's an exception to the norm. So I'm talking about the norm is that if you do that, you'll have enough material. That's on the achievement. But the third one...
It's a bit more quantitative.
Yeah, quantitative. The third one is about relationship. How do you deal with people? That's another thing. So in a relationship, you now really to ask penetrative questions about people when you interview them. The questions are directed about what did the person do in a conflict? And you
Yes.
ask them questions about conflicts and how do they deal with that. Because in workplaces, politics, there are people, all sorts of different people inside in an organization. Some the good, the bad, and the ugly. But you have to be able to pick them because you have everybody inside there. So the best managers are the folks that know how to deal with various types of people. The EQ is when you are now looking. The first one is called capacity. That's very much IQ. Very, very much IQ. But the A is about the drive of the person, achievement, motivation. So in short, this is CARL. And in my view, CAR, the L is leadership. So you want to look at the person, whether the person had leadership. And normally you will see it, whether the person is a prefect in school, whether the person has take a leadership role. But of course, there are exceptions to the norm. The guys are late bloomers, etc. But normally, you will see them very early on in their career. You will see how they stand in a crowd. So those are the main things I'm looking at. So really, I mean, I look at the students. There are a lot of people who have first-class honors from Ivy League. When I look at this, they don't cut it for me. Because I'm looking at that as an entry point. But if you fail the CARL, you don't come and work in PEMANDU.
Yeah.
There are many people that we reject with the top notes, but they can't hack it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of, I think for me, one of the key things that I look for whenever I'm interviewing is someone's learning posture.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking about this video that's been going out recently of Simon Sinek, and he was talking about the Navy SEALs.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
you know, the XY axis of performance versus trust. And, you know, for those who might not have seen that video, he was saying that one of the things that they do in the Navy SEALs to filter out recruits is to look at where people sit in this chart and this axis. But interestingly, he looked at the Navy SEALs being the highest performing team in the world. The irony is that as the highest performing team, they would rather pick people who are maybe low to medium on the axis of performance, but high in trust. Now, on that, I would maybe add a third thing, which is posture of learning or willingness to want to learn. Because actually, if you have a learning posture, then I think you can. I would naturally think of this person as trustworthy if they have a desire to learn.
Yeah.
That means I can trust that they will do the things required to upskill themselves and then be reliable in a team context. But one of the ways that I try to find this in people, and I don't take credit for this, but we sit as part of a wider Alpha hub. Within the hub, we have a best practice as well for interviews. It's a set play. And we spend a lot of time asking people about what you mentioned earlier, asking people to give examples about past issues that have come up in work. So we ask them to talk about past projects that have gone well, outline exactly what was the case study for it and how did your contributions help to move the needle. But then within that same conversation, we will then move to asking them, well, looking back, what might you have done differently? Because there we want to see whether or not these candidates are self-aware. And out of that, we then ask, how might you have handled certain conversations differently? So this goes into how do you resolve conflicts, how do you manage the relationships as well, which I think is a very, very important part.
Very, very important because, in organization, you need to work as a team.
Yeah.
And so I was reminded by an old colleague of mine. He described a really high achiever in a company. He said, that guy is a real high achiever. But if you look behind the path that he took to reach that achievement, look behind him, he leaves a trail of dead bodies. And that is a guy that you do not want to work in an organization that really want to be sustainable and you want to encourage people and work as a team.
Yeah.
So very high performance, but very low trust.
And I think this is why we're intentional about usually drawing from past things, because we realize in interviews, obviously people are going to give the best version of themselves at an interview. So you have to take everything with a little pinch of salt. People will magnify what is good, ×2 at the very least. But what we realize is that it's a lot harder to fake retelling or reflecting on something in the past than it is to BS on a hypothetical. If you ask people to reflect on the past and they try to dress it up a little bit, you can actually tell. But I personally find it very difficult to tell if someone is BSing if they're presenting a hypothetical, you know, or if they're presenting a general philosophy of how they think work should be, how they describe their approach. But if you get people to talk about very specific examples of when they had a project fail or something didn't go quite right or this relationship was tricky and they tell you about it, that is very telling. And I quite enjoy seeing people talk about that. We've been talking about a posture of learning, and I wonder for you, what are you committed to learning in this current season?
I'm committed to learning about farming. I mean, it is part of my podcast, You know, I talked a lot about before. I'm also trying to do that. And there's a lot of mistakes that we're doing today, and I've not been successful in breeding the chicks, the pheasant chicks. They've all died after 2 to 3 days. In fact, the latest one's still alive. We have 2 that's alive there.
But I saw it just now.
I haven't really mastered that, so I'm going to do that. The other one is that I'm committed to, during this period, to really finish the book. So I know I'm...
A lot of people have been asking about it.
A lot of people, I know I'm behind schedule on it. The reason why I'm behind schedule, Leon, is this. I could finish writing the book. The whole manuscript is written. But I realized as we do the podcast, there's so many changes I need to make to that book now, the manuscript, because of this. So there's so much richness of the discussions that took place in this podcast that I had to put into all the pages that are already there, about 500 pages. So I now have to spend more time going back to the drawing board and redo it. So learning how to write a book, that will be my first book. And the third one is the thing that your mom and I are really trying to discover, what is it that we intend to do for the second half of our life. So the learning for me is this.
I thought you were going to talk about your singing lessons, which you and mom just started.
That's another thing that we're doing. We're doing some
skills-based learning.
Skills-based learning. So we got a tutor that comes. We've now four lessons so far. And so a lot of learning, that everything can be learned. And so tennis also learning. So a lot of things of that nature. But every single day, Leon, I'm watching podcasts because I got time on hand now reflecting on world affairs, what's happening with Israel. Not a single day passed by for me to not update what's happening with the Ukraine war, what's happening with the Palestinian conflict. Not a single day passed by. And everything I study and learn about it. And I follow many podcasts to learn about many things happening in the world today. So world affairs is something I'm keeping up abreast with. And there's so much learning, Leon, lifelong learning every single day.
Finally, do you think that a learning posture is something that is inherent in a person, or do you think that that is something that can be developed? And if so, what do you think are ways that somebody who maybe isn't so inclined to wanting to learn, what are things that maybe you would say to encourage people to have this posture of lifelong learning?
Yeah, I think the way to do that is to bring the 3 ways, in my view, to encourage people to learn. Bring someone that can teach people in the classroom, for example, to say, I was a student that was not interested in learning before. And there's a change that took place in me. And this change was the thing that caused me to really get into learning. Normally, testimonial from someone who's made the leapfrog is very convincing for people who are in that category. So that's first one. The other one is just bring the role model, people who are really intelligent. And I'm always looking at those icons. I look at people who are so good at doing a certain thing. For example, because we're doing the singing, and last night I was Googling and find out, how do I learn to speak like Morgan Freeman? And there were 5 lessons on how to speak like Morgan Freeman. Mm-hmm. And it can really be taught, actually. At 4 o'clock last night, I was listening to it and trying to really imitate Morgan Freeman. I'm not there yet. In fact, the guy who was teaching it, he spent 4 years learning how to speak like Morgan Freeman.
It's very funny you mention. It's very funny you mentioned that because Morgan Freeman has played Mandela. I think it was in the movie Invictus.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said in the comments on TikTok, IG, you sound like Nelson Mandela. So I think you are halfway through sounding like Morgan Freeman.
I really like Morgan Freeman's voice. I think it's just incredible voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is that there's so much you can learn. I mean, in this day and age, as I said, the sky's the limit for lifelong learning.
Well, very good. I think that's a great place to end today's podcast. Lifelong learning. If you are thinking about learning something, be encouraged to go ahead and do it. There's so many ways for you to learn. You can learn. You can obviously do another degree if you want, like my brother, do a master's or whatever it is. But there's so many other courses available, as well as podcasts like this one as well, for you to draw knowledge from and insight. Thank you all for watching yet another episode. We post episodes weekly every Friday at 6 a.m. So if you've enjoyed this, you can tune in, follow us, subscribe to us on YouTube as well as Spotify. But we also post short form content on both IG and TikTok at The Game of Impossible. We've enjoyed having this conversation, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.